Hello everyone, welcome to Thrifty Thursdays, a little series I'm doing this month where we show you a few ideas for your fabric scraps and what you could potentially do with them. For this week's episode, we are making a little eye sleep mask. I'm using some cotton, a few layers of it that I had left over, just to give it a little bit of padding, a little bit of wadding, give it some comfort. And then here I am going on to cut out my inner layer. I decided to make my inner layer quite fun because that's what I was working with. These series are all about just working with what you have and making the most of it. Now I'm cutting out my outer layer, and what better fabric could we possibly have for this outer layer? As soon as I saw it, I knew that this was the project for this fabric. I'm sure you can understand why. Once you're done with that, I went on to cutting my elastic. So what I did was I measured around my head from where the eye mask started to where the eye mask ended, and then snipped the elastic there. I then stretched out the elastic and cut the fabric to where the elastic ended whilst it was stretched so that I had enough for the fabric to flex with the elastic. I then sewed the fabric down into a little tube before turning it out with a safety pin. We're just turning it out so that you don't see any of the seam allowance and so that it's nice and neatly finished off. Now use the same safety pin to feed the elastic through the tunnel. As I was pulling it through, when the end got to the edge of the fabric, I decided to sew it down before continuing to pull the elastic through, just so that I don't lose the elastic inside the tube and struggle to get it out. I then finished feeding the elastic through. And sewed down the other side. Now I grabbed all of my layers and put my wadding layers down first, then my inner layer facing up and my outer layer facing down. We want the layers that are going to be on show facing each other so that way it all looks lovely once you're done. I then took my little gathered piece of fabric with elastic and put it in between the inner layer and the outer layer so that it will be on the outside once you are done sewing and you flip it all out. I also left an opening at the top of this eye mask so I can flip it all out, and I can also use that to adjust my elastic headband bit. Once I was done sewing all around the edge, minus the little gap for turning it out, I cut down my excess seam allowance and flipped it all the right side out. It takes a little bit of fiddling with it just to get everything to lay the way it's supposed to. And I also pressed it quickly before sewing down the opening and doing a nice little top stitch just around all of the edge of the eye mask. And then once you're done top stitching, you're done. See, that was so easy. It only took me about half an hour. Anyway, see you next week. Bye.